webinars in partnership with the United Nations Counter-Terrorism Centre. My name is Tony Kingham. I'm editor of Border Security Report magazine, the director of the World Border Security Congress and the Border Security Network. This week's webinar focuses on border challenges in the Sahel region. But before we go on, just one housekeeping point. On the top right-hand side of your screen, you'll see two tabs, Chat and Q&A. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box, and we will try to cover as many as we can at the end of the webinar. Once again, we have a distinguished panel of expert speakers, but before we go on, we have some opening remarks from Mr. Ulrich Arnfeldt-Müllerup, Chief of Countering Terrorism Section at the United Nations Counter-Terrorism Centre. Ulrich, over to you.
Many thanks, Tony, and welcome to everybody. Welcome and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the world. We're very pleased to have you at this webinar on border challenges in the Sahel region in the context of counterterrorism and related transnational organized crime. As Chief of the Counterterrorism Section within the UN Counter-Terrorism Center, UNCCT, in the UN Office of Counterterrorism, I'm delighted to open the second webinar of what we call A View to a Border, a series of 4 geographically focused technical dialogues that UNCCT, in partnership with the World Security Border Congress, is conducting over the course of the next 2 months. Delivered under the framework of the UNCCT's Global Border Security and Management Program, which aims to strengthen member states' capacities to prevent the cross-border movement of terrorists and stem the flow of foreign terrorist fighters. The objectives of these webinars is to focus attention on the strategic benefits of effective border security and management in countering terrorism and related transnational crime, and provide a valuable technical border analysis within the context of the 4 regions selected. Effective border security and management is the first line of defense in detecting and preventing the movement of terrorists and FTFs across borders, as well as preventing the smuggling or trafficking of persons, drugs, small arms and light weapons, and other illicit cargo that may be used for terrorist purposes. However, it is also important to recognize that measures to counter terrorism may also have far-reaching impacts on the rule of law and human rights, in particular the right to privacy, the right to freedom of movement, the right to liberty and security. Yet I wish to note that effectively countering terrorism and protecting and promoting human rights are both fully achievable and mutually reinforcing objectives. Through our BSM units, UNCCT is committed to supporting member states to responsibly implement comprehensive border security and management measures and strategies, enhancing technical and operational capacities, and increase interagency and cross-border cooperation and information sharing in line with international law. During the webinar today, you will hear from counterterrorism coordinators, border and law enforcement officials and practitioners, as well as experts from international and regional organizations, who will share with us their expertise, experiences, and ideas for addressing the challenges that member states face in effectively securing their borders. Thank you for joining us today. Particularly, I would like to express my sincere appreciations to our guest speakers. This webinar would not have been possible without their contributions and valuable insights and perspectives. I sincerely hope you find the interactive dialogue interesting and encourage you to actively participate in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Certainly, I used to manage this portfolio on border security, and I've dealt with the issues for many years. So I'm particularly interested in hearing your views on how these things are developing over the next years. So without further ado, I'll now give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Christine Bradley, who is the manager of the Global Security and Management Program, who will be moderating for this webinar. Christine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ulrich. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to webinar number 2. I'm very pleased to be here today to moderate our discussions regarding the threat landscape, border security management challenges, and national, regional, and international response measures and mechanisms relating to countering terrorism and transnational organized crime in the Sahel region. As with webinar number 1, we have a most interesting program for our discussions today. However, just a quick caveat before we begin, I just want to note that the webinar is intended to really be a frank and open discussion, and the opinions expressed in the presentations do not necessarily reflect the views of the Secretariat of the United Nations or the governments of its member states. And so now, to get us started, we will begin our first session that will really lay out the context and frame the region's regional threat landscape. So let me waste no more time and proceed with introducing our first expert speaker, Mr. Marc Vaillant. He is the Regional Program Coordinator for West Africa for the UN Office of Counter-Terrorism within the UN Counter-Terrorism Center. So Marc, we are very pleased and happy to have you with us today, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Christine, and greetings to you all.